All right, I want to keep this entertaining and live, and if you guys have questions, go ahead and put it in the chat, because I'm super excited. This is something that we've used in our business to exponentially grow, and I'm going to share that stuff with you today. So, the power of podcasting. Pain points for most law firms: struggling to get qualified leads, difficulty increasing revenue, increasing credibility and trust, staying top of mind, boosting brand awareness, creating consistent content, implementing an effective follow-up strategy, and something that we don't necessarily talk about, but imposter syndrome when it comes to content creation. And so we'll talk about all of these things today and how we sort of solve those problems. The goal for this webinar is to show you guys how podcasting can grow your brand, your referral partnerships, joint venture partnerships, recruiting, and more. So let's talk about the human connection. I know AI is starting to infiltrate everything that we do, but what it will never do, it will never replace the human connection. And what we've done with the podcast and how we're using it as a strategy is to really connect with human beings. And in that process, we're able to grow, opportunities arise, we can scale businesses, top line revenue increases, and the whole nine. So a little bit about me. Who is Armando? Award-winning actor and filmmaker. I've been in this business for over 20 years. I've done over 60 television and film projects. Our company, Leduc Entertainment, currently produces over 400 videos a month. My podcast is about to hit 200 episodes. We're in the top 10% of all podcasts in the world. I have failed a lot. I continue to fail, but we also learn in the process, and we continue to refine this process. So this is a little bit about me. Armando, 18 to 30, clueless, broke, super alcoholic, hard-headed, know-it-all. I declared bankruptcy super early on, terrible with money, major imposter syndrome, and I was like always wearing this mask, which is why I always thought that acting was good for me, because I was like, man, I can always be somebody else. But when it had to be me and putting myself out there, I had huge imposter syndrome, and we'll talk about a little bit about how this process can help you with that. Graduated with a 1.8 GPA. Woohoo! So if I can do it, I'm sure you guys can. Y'all are a lot smarter than I am. So my desire, what I wanted: wealth, direction, stability, to know that I mattered, to be confident. I wanted to get married. I wanted to have children, and I wanted to create impact, right? Those were my desires. And so the pandemic hit, and we're sitting there, and I'm trying to figure things out, and I'm super struggling. And I know Lewis was like, man, he's blowing up in Atlanta. He's doing amazing job with his law firm. I was like, hey man, do you think we could just get on a Zoom call, and like I could interview you about how you became as successful as you were? I didn't have a fancy setup, didn't even have a name for the podcast, wasn't even a podcast at the time. I just wanted to learn from somebody that was successful and just create a connection. There was no ulterior motive here. I wasn't trying to sell. I was only trying to connect, right? This was in July 2022 of 2020. Then November comes. Lewis is like, hey, I've launched this company called 8 Figure Firm. I want you to come and create content for me. And I was like, would love to do that. He became a mentor. He's like, Armando, you have a 7-figure business. You just don't know how to get there. And I was like, okay, I will pay you to do this too. And as a result, has referred me over $500,000 in business over the last few years, right? And what happened was we connected, we built trust together. Yes, we went to high school together, but it wasn't, we never had a business relationship, right? And so what happened was we started working together, and all of this because of that one connection on that podcast that like changed the whole game. And so I'm going to teach you guys a secret strategy on how I use podcasting to create joint venture and referral partnerships. I use it to create content for social media, and then I also use it for recruiting. So you guys take some notes, If you guys have questions, let me know. Here's the good news, everybody. Nobody's going to watch your podcast. All right. That's the good news, right? It's like when Lewis is talking about at the masterminds, nobody knows you, right? So it doesn't matter. You guys can take those bags off and that pressure off because nobody's going to watch your podcast. That is okay. They will at some point, but that's not why you're creating this podcast. You're creating the podcast for referral partnerships, joint venture partnerships, content for social media, and recruiting. That is all you need to focus on, okay? So, what is a joint venture? Here's story time. So, Rufus Crescent, financial advisor to me now, has referred me over $300,000 worth of business. He's also saved me thousands of dollars being my financial advisor. I brought him onto my podcast, I think 3 years ago. He was podcast guest number 6 or 7. We started talking. He introduced me to a guy named Bob Schenefeld who runs a mastermind called the Visionary Forum. I ended up going over there. He hired us to start creating all of his content. He's referred me $90K in business, introduced me to a guy named Ryan Angot. Ryan Angot has a VA company, and now we're in a strategic partnership with Ryan Angot and his VA company. So the networking that starts to happen after you start creating, these relationships with your podcasts, I can't even quantify. Well, I can because I have here, but also the opportunities that arise as a result of creating the podcast is something that I can't quantify, right? Because you never know who sees your podcast that you got introduced to from so-and-so, and then all of a sudden you're in a whole different world of people that you never would have met any other way. And it's super easy to connect with people. And I like the book, The 5 Love Languages. I hope y'all have read that book. If not, it's an amazing book. But here are the 5 love languages, right? Words of affirmation, gift giving, acts of service, quality time, and physical touch. And so what I've done in the, here you go. All right. And what I've done with the podcast strategy is go, okay, how do I create touch points with all of these different love language touch points? Words of affirmation. If you give somebody a platform to talk about themselves, they're going to feel great. And you can blow their head up. Oh my God, you're amazing. How successful you are. Teach me some things. Give me some nuggets, right? Gift giving. After I always give people swag after they get on my show. We have mugs and things like that. I just did a podcast this morning with the group Giftology. And so they have a whole strategy on how they use gifting as a way to connect with people. So our first touch point is inviting them to the podcast, and then we can roll into a relationship where we're gift giving, acts of service. We're posting their episode on their social media. Quality time. The podcast itself is quality time because we're spending time asking about them. And physical touch. People, handshakes, hugs, if you're into that sort of thing. So, secret number 2, social media content. We post every day. We post engaging content. We use it to engage with our followers. It humanizes our brand, of course. Social media is for brand building and social currency. So I know a lot of people are like, well, I'm not getting cases for my social media. Well, it's not necessarily about getting the cases. If you're using it for ads, then sure. But what happens when I go, hey, I've been in an accident. Clark speaks. I find out about him somehow through an ad, maybe a billboard, whatever. What's the first thing that they're going to do? They're going to Google Clark speaks, right? And then they're going to see maybe they're on Instagram. They want to see his content. Maybe they're on LinkedIn. Maybe they're on TikTok. Maybe they're on all of these things. And whatever comes up on Google, your social media is going to come out. Your videos are going to come out. Your podcast may come out. And all this does is add to the credibility and the social currency of the brand, right? Because if I go to somebody and I look them up on Google and I see nothing, it's like you don't exist, right? So that's how we use social media. Don't be afraid to give your opinion. And podcasting makes it super easy to create content because you're just having a conversation. Okay. Story time. So I have the privilege of getting to sing on the new Bayou Adventure ride on Disney. So if you guys go to the ride, you'll hear me singing on it. Well, let me tell you the backstory. John Crescent was, I think, podcast guest number 12. He's brothers with Rufus Crescent. So he's my accountant. He saved me thousands of dollars. Introduced me to Nick Cepeda. Nick Cepeda ended up hiring us to do his content. He has a construction company. He knows one of the producers that were looking for a guy that wanted to sing. They took one of the songs and made it like a Latin version of the song. And he's like, hey, my friend Armando, he sings. He'd be great. And ended up getting on this Disney ride as a result of the podcast, because I met John, who introduced me to Nick, who introduced me to the producers of the Disney Adventure. So fun. You never know who you're going to meet as a result of this podcast. Now, secret number 3, recruiting. And I have an amazing story for that. You can find A players, you can find attorneys, you can find vendors. Use it for blind spots in your business. What does that mean? So when you guys are having your weekly calls and you're like, damn, we just really can't figure this thing out, right? What I do is I go, okay, guys, let's not try to figure out how to fix this problem. Let's figure out who it is that we need to figure this problem out. And I'm talking about A player. I want the best person to help me figure out this problem. Then I go to Google, I look that person up, and then I invite them to my podcast. I create a relationship, and now I have a relationship with this person that can help me out with that problem. I have my CFO, my COO, my CMO, all of these people, my financial advisor, my accountant, all of these people are now in my organization as people that I've been able to recruit as a result of having them on my podcast. So I also use it for case study videos. What does that mean? Invite your past clients, invite current clients to come on and talk about them and talk about what their interaction is and their experiences with your company. Right? And you can use that as a case study video. You can extract those clips, and then through your prospect and customer journey, you guys can be sending those videos out to help people choose you as the firm. So Will Brooks, my COO, he should be on this call, but he's been with me for 3 years, invaluable to my business, is one of the reasons why my business has been able to grow to where it's at. I was doing a podcast. I was supposed to do it in Augusta, ended up doing it in Atlanta. I invited him because me and him knew each other from back in the day. He was working at a theater, and I was like, dude, why are you working at a theater? You don't need to be doing that. Like, why don't you come work for me? Ends up coming work for me. 3 years later, boom, we're off to the races. One of the best decisions I've ever made for my company. Chris Foster, same deal. Had him on my podcast. Amazing videographer. We've been working now together for 3 years. Shows up, knocks it out of the park. It's not a weird dude because I don't know what it is about videographers, but they're like always just super weird. So loved having him. Brian Hong, another guy. I told Will, I was like, look, man, we need to find a good SEO and website guy. He's like, this guy seems to be the top of the top pick in New Orleans. I said, great, let's invite him to the podcast. He's also now a referral partner for us. He does our SEO web design. He's also my AI consultant. Introduced me to my automation specialist, Steve Fantasia, who handles all of my Go High level automations. So, and that's just how that networking starts to happen. So y'all are probably wondering, how does this work for law firms? So this is what I would do if I was a business and tax attorney. I would go, okay, who are the people that I want to reach out to? Entrepreneurs, accountants, CPAs, financial advisors, bankers, business consultants, real estate agents, wealth managers, insurance brokers. And I would invite the top people in this field to my podcast to create these relationships. Also, I'm now going to borrow their social currency. So immediately, if you have somebody that's like at the top of the game, you have them on your podcast. Now you have their social currency as a result of having them on your podcast. I had Gino Wickman, who created EOS. I had him on my podcast. All of a sudden, people that were in my pipeline that I was trying to close saw that Gino Wickman was on my podcast, calls me up. How'd you get Gino Wickman on the podcast? And I was like, oh, wow. Immediately, my social currency went up, and I was able to close those deals. So that's what I would be doing if I was a business and tax attorney. Estate planning attorneys, same deal. Entrepreneurs, accountants, financial advisors, bankers, insurance brokers. I also think about local influencers that are living in your city, especially personal injury attorneys. We'll talk about that here in a second. But like influencers that you can pay $200, $300, $400 to come onto your podcast and have a conversation, and now they can share your podcast. You're now involved with them. There's a relationship there, and you're borrowing their social currency as well, right? Family law attorneys, these are the people that I would target: therapists, counselors, financial planners, mediators, real estate agents, child therapists, private investigators, and then personal injury attorneys. I would target, chiropractors, emergency room doctors, local businesses, personal trainers, influencers, workers' compensation attorneys, other attorneys that don't do what you do. Those would be good people to bring on the podcast. And in closing, my results, I'm 200 episodes in on my podcast called Spaghetti on the Wall. I've been introduced to some incredible people. That's Pat Lencioni, who wrote the book, 6 Types of Working Genius. Amazing opportunities. And money-wise, I've been able to close $2.1 million as a result of my podcast. Either people coming on my podcast that ended up hiring me, or referrals from people that I've had on my podcast that I've created joint ventures with, referral partnerships with. And it's just really connecting. It's really like just creating that human connection and creating a journey for those people that's intentional, so that when we're reaching out to those people, it's in a heart-centric manner. It's not bait and switchy. It's not, like I said, like if you're going in with the intention of, I'm going to get something out of this from them. Like that's not the intention. That's not the mindset. The mindset is to give somebody a platform, talk to them about what they do, create that connection, create that relationship. And if things happen as a result, awesome. If they don't, that's cool too, right? But like it's a win-win situation for me. So I can share this with you guys, and I'll open up for conversations and questions. I know that was quick.